My name is Phyllis Farrell, and I am pleased to be your MC for the evening. I'm actually going to hand over opening remarks to Paul Azen, but first, let me do a little bit of a description of the Clinical Trial Recruitment Laboratory, or CTRL. So the Clinical Trial Recruitment Laboratory was started back in 2020, actually, when we, during COVID, realized that we were really moving too slowly with Alzheimer's disease clinical trial recruitment. And you all know things like the Jeff Cummings pipeline report. We need 50,000 patients a year to adjudicate that research. And right now, we're only recruiting between 12 or 13,000 patients a year. I don't know about you, but I have this disease in my family, and I'm not willing for the research to move that slowly. So the goal of the Clinical Trial Recruitment Laboratory at USC is to make sure that we move things faster, and we have a wonderful partnership with at USC and at ATRI and with Gates Ventures and the American Heart Association. And so I'd like to bring up our leader, Paul Azen, to welcome you and tell you a little bit why he thinks this is so important. Paul.
Welcome. It's great to see all of you here in this room. And of course, I don't think I need to tell you how important recruitment is. ATRI is a clinical trials institute at USC. So we are all about clinical trial methods and about recruitment. But USC is a great place with many schools and many institutes. And in arriving at USC a decade ago, our research team looked around and found a lot of partners. And one of our partners was the Schaeffer Center, now the Schaeffer Institute, bringing a health policy and government interaction perspective to the development of therapeutics. And it's been just a great relationship, and we've gotten together. And CTRL, or Control, is a collaboration between these two institutes of USC. And with the help of Gates Ventures and others, we've really been pushing forward the science of recruitment. And that's really what we're about. And I think that the recognition that our biggest bottleneck, especially now that we have effective treatments, and we've got to refine those treatments and advance AD therapeutics, we need lots of clinical trials. So as Phyllis said, or as Jeff Cummings says, we need many, many people. And as we're moving earlier, so to pre-symptomatic disease where we can have the biggest effect, we need new recruitment paradigms altogether, where we're trying to engage individuals who are cognitively normal, but on the basis of age or age and family history are worried about brain health and cognitive impairment, and specifically Alzheimer's disease. We need new plans for connecting with them and recruiting large numbers of people into very early intervention trials. And so we need to learn more how to do it. And getting a community of experts together and two institutes, one with a clinical trials emphasis and one with a health policy and economic focus, getting them together and gathering our communities and working together is the way that we make progress as quickly as we need to over the coming years. So thank you for joining us and welcome.
So I'm going to hit just a couple of highlights around who and what CTRL is. This is a little bit of our coming out party. We've been kind of doing this quietly in the background for a little bit, and we couldn't think of a better place to have a coming out party than at CTAD, right? The Clinical Trials of Alzheimer's Disease Conference. And so, having a coming out party with your people is a smart thing to do. So our mission, as you've heard, is really to bring together cross-sector collaborators that disseminate innovative recruitment strategies and improve the access and representation. So it's not just about completing a study, it's about completing it quickly, and it's about completing it with good representation. I have to tell a story that I just heard a few minutes ago at our advisory committee meeting, and I hope he's okay if I tell it. But Jim Taylor was talking about his wife being involved in the phase 1 study of aducanumab and how it was working, and they were really excited about the phase 1 results. And he thought, wow, this phase 3 study is gonna enroll so quickly. And it ended up taking 36 months for them to find 3,600 patients. And not only from an industry sponsor is that really expensive, but his heart was broken because it meant they were gonna have to wait that much longer to get the results. They were gonna have to wait that much longer for the drug to be submitted. I had a similar experience when I joined Lilly, and the Expedition 1 and 2 study were going on, and someone came up to me and said, Phyllis, we recruited this study faster than any study ever. And I was like, great, tell me more. Now remember, I'd come from marketing. And they said, it only took us 18 months to find 1,000 people in the US. And I was like, what? I was like, okay, we got a problem. At that time, we didn't have amyloid inclusion in that study, and we didn't have any real competitive studies. There were 5 million people with the disease. We were also enrolling moderate patients. There's no way that we can do the kind of research that we have coming at us at that pace. We have to do something that's dramatically different, that's not just incremental benefit. So that's what the vision is that we become a place where all of you who are doing this research and you're figuring out what's working and not working, you're sharing it back to this central group so that we can make sure everyone benefits from it and that these learnings are in a center of excellence. Our goal then is to support and evaluate innovative recruitment strategies. There is a science to doing this, and we need to make sure that we know what good looks like, we know how to measure what good looks like, and then we disseminate that. We want to shape policy and practice, just like all of our pre-competitive efforts in this field, and we have lots of them that we've done really well. We are going to find things that if we can uncover them or if we can break down the policy barrier, it benefits everyone. And that's why we sit at the Schaeffer Policy Institute, because we get to tap into that incredible capability that organization has, that when we identify these barriers, we can make the change. And then we really want control to be a national resource, so that here in the US, there is a place where someone can get online, and you'll see, we should have cards somewhere with the QR code on it, to get online and be able to see a knowledge hub where that information is available to you. So with that, I get to introduce my boss, Dana Goldman. So Dana is leading, well, he's the founder actually of the US Schaeffer Institute for Public Policy and Governance Science. He's worked across multiple therapeutic areas, and he's spent the last day and a half with me interviewing executives across the board that are here with industry sponsors to learn more about Alzheimer's disease, and it relates to clinical trial recruitment. But as you're going to see from his presentation, he actually knows quite a bit about the value of early detection and the value of innovation. So Dana, come on up for our keynote.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's always been a bucket list item of mine to give a keynote at a major scientific conference, but I was rejected for CTAD. So I thought, what better than to organize my own, and I'll keynote. So with that, so what I want to give is a little bit of a policy context for why what all of you are doing is super important. And I want to begin, I spend a lot of time in Washington. We have an office there. And, you know, what you hear a lot is that America is falling behind in life expectancy. What you see here graphed is selected developed nations and trends in life expectancy at birth. And one of the amazing things everyone knows about Japan, I think, and how they're a leader in aging so well. But you look at a country like Korea, if you go back to in the 1970s, Korea, life expectancy was about 62 years, and now it's approaching life expectancy of Japan. And you think about, we often measure, I'm an economist, And we often measure development as GDP, but it's actually also health. And when you add these two together, you see Korea has actually experienced a rather remarkable transformation, and that has a lot of social welfare. And I put up Turkey here because Turkey has been a laggard, and this is what the United States looks like. So we started in the middle of the pack in the 1970s, and now we can say that we are just above Turkey and lagging behind all the other developed countries. And you hear this a lot in Washington. Now, one thing you might think is that maybe that's not a fair criticism because we know that there are other reasons that we might be lagging. But there's an interesting phenomenon, which is what I've done here is I've arrayed health spending per person on the horizontal axis and life expectancy on the vertical axis. And what you'd like to do is spend nothing and live a long time. And so that's the goal. And it doesn't work out that way. You start plotting all these OECD countries, and what you see is there's a remarkable linear correspondence between how much a country spends and how healthy it is. And you may ask, so where's the United States in this? Well, the US is over here. We're spending quite a bit, and as you know, I've already told you, we have really poor outcomes. Now, economists for a long time used to say that it's just the prices, and there is a certain element of truth to that. We have very high prices, and we do a lot of work at the Schaeffer Center, now Institute, on that topic. But really, and this is where, this is the only time you'll hear me say MAHA, and prices do matter, but chronic disease is also an important contributor. And, you know, the reason that life expectancy figures aren't so useful is because if clinical care is really only contributing 20% to population health, then can we really indict the US healthcare system for that? And what we've seen is a remarkable growth in the number of chronic conditions, especially among older Americans. So in 1998, for example, 38% of the population had no chronic conditions. And whereas now it's down to, I think, 25%. I should have brought my glasses with me. But you can see that those with a multiplicity of chronic conditions, it's doubled. Okay. So what are we doing? We've invested a lot of effort at the Schaeffer Center, mostly funded by NIH, to really measure the value of preventing and treating chronic disease. We've got funding from a lot of sources. Some of them are in the room. I'm not going to go through a lot of this. But really what we've found is that we are dramatically underinvesting in chronic disease prevention. And we started on this journey, actually, I think, you know, we wrote a paper in 2010 where we pointed out from a public health perspective, at that time, everyone was talking about smoking. And we actually made the point that if you really think about the fiscal crisis that we face with healthcare spending, really the best thing we could do is address obesity. And I had no idea that we would actually make such progress along that lines. And so some of the work we've been doing at the Schaeffer Center, what we found is that, for example, with the development of GLP-1s, you could offset up to 1.5 trillion in Medicare spending. So in other words, if you want to bend the cost curve, we have found a way to do that by addressing the precursors to very expensive disease. And this work has had a lot of policy salience in Washington, you know, and, you know, one of the things I face in any we are studiously nonpartisan, we are bipartisan in some ways, and so I had to figure out how do you present our results to a Republican audience given the change in administration. And, you know, maybe the best way to think about this is we built models to look at what is the rate of return to investing in access to GLP-1s. And so the benchmark is the S&P 500. Everyone says you should have invested in the S&P in 2000, and that's right. It's 7% return. Microsoft stock did even better, by the way, over this period. But another thing that everyone agrees is that we should be investing in kids. And Jim Heckman, a Nobel laureate who's in our center, he's shown that early childhood education has a return of 9%. Well, if you look at anti-obesity medications generally, and even if you array it, there's a certain heterogeneity in who would benefit. But you're talking about rates of return that are almost double that. And so, I think, so we have made progress here, and Alzheimer's represents the next biggest public health challenge in our view. We've got 5.6 million people living with dementia, and we've been funded by NIA to look at the costs. And we just came out with our number. It's the cost of dementia, so this is beyond Alzheimer's. There's about 200, again, I wish I brought my glasses, but there's about 230 billion in medical and long-term care costs. That by itself is a large number. But often those costs belie an even more dramatic story, and that is the quality of life loss for persons with dementia, the costs of informal care, foregone earnings for the care partners, and even the quality of life loss for those of you who've had to care for partners. And when you add all that up, the toll is staggering. It's about $780 billion annually. And so, and by the way, I said, I'll say probably 3 times that I'm an economist. This will be number 2. And Medicare and Medicaid are paying about 71% of the medical and long-term care costs, and it's really rather remarkable. And so when you think, why can't we invest in our airports, our roads, our kids, and things like that, it has a lot to do with healthcare costs. I mean, it doesn't have to do with SNAP, actually. SNAP is cheap. That's a relative statement, non-political statement. We can debate SNAP all day, but what matters really is long-term care and Medicare and Medicaid. And these are, basically the US government is a health insurer with a Navy. I think Ben Bernanke said that. Anyway, so we've been working with Control to, try to influence the national conversation. I want to give you some sense of what the value, if we can get some of these therapies to market and get them to patients. And so I want to show you some of the data. So here's, for example, a model of cognitive status over time. In this case, it's being measured by the CDR sum of boxes, under the status quo, we know people on average will decline in their cognitive status as they age. If you look at Trailblazer 2, people were enrolled at baseline, they had a score of about 3.9 on the CDR SB. And the availability of treatment slows that cognitive decline in that area under the curve. The question is, what is the value of that improvement? But you can also ask, what would happen if we went a little earlier? And actually, if you look at Trailblazer 2, there's some evidence in there that you could treat earlier and actually do a better job bending that or mitigating that cognitive decline. And so there's some additional value, say, to treating 2 years earlier. And then you can even ask, for example, what would happen if we could have prevented the disease? And so what I want to show you are some numbers about what those things look like. And one way to look at it also is to come back to life expectancy. Under the status quo, so we took a cohort that looks a lot like the people who had shown cognitive decline in a nationally representative survey. It's called the Health and Retirement Study, and it's been funded by NIH, and they've been collecting data since 1992. You have a population that's about 71 years of age, and that, under the status quo, these people can expect to live about 14.7 years of life. And about 2.6 of those years are going to be spent in a nursing home. Along comes donanemab, and what happens is you actually can add about 0.4 years of life. And that may not sound like a lot, but you're actually adding more than half a year of life spent in the community, and you're reducing nursing home use. And one of the, I used to be on the CBO's panel of advisors, and nothing would make the CBO more scared than people living longer, because it costs all sorts of money. So, they get very upset when they see something like this, which is part of the reason I resigned. But in any event, but what's really remarkable is if you go even earlier in treatment, we show that you have approximately the same years of life, but you can even reduce that even further. And with prevention, the way we've modeled it, you can actually extend that so that you're adding a year of life and reducing a year spent in a nursing home. And so when you start, and you can also look at, we've also have the ability to look at other things, and we've shown that even among these 71-year-olds, you can have them spending more time, working more. You can add about a quarter of a year spent working. And the result is that, and I said we really need to bend the cost curve, that if you annuitize those costs, that is, average them across the years, what you get is you could reduce Medicaid spending if you could prevent this disease by 35%. Budget problem is solved. So what you're doing in this room could actually not only save lives, but could also allow Trump to, no more jokes, sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna move on. Adding up all this value demonstrates, and so, I wanna come back to, there are the health gains, there's the reduced medical costs, and what you see is there's value in all these things. The caregiver quality of life, greater earnings, which are modest here because this population tends not to work. But at the end of the day, what it means is that the current treatments that we have on the market are worth about, I'm gonna make my deadline, are worth about $113,000 to every individual who was eligible for the trial. If we treated them earlier, we could get that to $151,000. And if we could have found a way to intervene before they showed decrements on that cognitive scale, the value is about $300,000 plus. Now, this doesn't take into account the cost of the medicine and all these other things, so those of you from pharma, don't go get light bulbs in your eyes. But I think the point of this is that the cost of AD and related dementias are enormous. If you could prevent it, it's worth about $300,000 to each person at risk. And the sooner we can identify these patients and at risk and offer treatment, the more value we generate. And every year that we delay means we get deeper into our fiscal hole and more people are suffering. And so I look forward to the conversation today to try to make some progress in that area. Thank you.
All of this can be made available. More importantly, this is the kind of information that we want to make sure is on this Knowledge Hub. So not just the operational things that we can be doing around best practices, but if you guys caught the symposium or the scientific symposium this morning on the floor, Lowell Schiller also presented around some of the FDA and some of the draft guidance around the diversity action plan. So the goal is to really have all these things in one place so that as you're trying to tell your story, whether that be locally to your organization or in your community, we do that. But let's not forget why we're doing this.
When I saw the behavior of my mom, I sought out information as to what was going on. I remember saying something to my husband, and so he gave me information. He said, read over this, and it showed me what things to say and not say. And that helped me in communicating with her.
I'm in a clinical study for Alzheimer's because my father was diagnosed with a memory impairment when I was 17 years old, and there's a family history. The reason I decided to join a clinical study, as I knew more about Alzheimer's disease, I wanted to find out what my risk would be for developing a memory impairment.
As I age, I started thinking, when I would forget something, could I be going through the same thing? So hence why I decided to go through the clinical trials as well.
Much of the focus in clinical trials and in observational studies is really looking at individuals at risk for Alzheimer's disease and related disorders and doing biomarker studies early on. All of those biomarkers allow us to see early indications of disease or even risk for disease.
There are genetic factors involved. There may be less access to care. So if we don't manage things like blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, then that's going to hasten the onset of dementia and feed into the development of Alzheimer's disease. It's more trying to meet with people in the community and understand where is the gap that we can fill and how do we help bring in folks and build trust.
The most rewarding part of my work is getting the information out. Because when we do Alzheimer's presentations and I talk about being in the study, after we finish the presentations, people will raise their hands and say, what do I need to do? I want to be a part of the study.
Big thank you to Gates Ventures and Jim Taylor and the MAP program for helping us get that video together. That's something else we'll make available to you if it's helpful for you. So with that, I would like to invite up here my partner in crime, Marae Jacobson. Marae is the scientific leader of the control group, and I am her head cheerleader. So I'm going to have her come up and introduce her panel.
We often think about a translational gap between animal studies getting into first-in-human trials. But we know in Alzheimer's disease there's another translational gap, which is getting people from the clinic into trials themselves. The Schaeffer Center has put together a white paper in 2020 documenting the different points along the dementia patient journey and the kind of bottlenecks at each of these stages, whether it's in primary care, getting cognitive screening, whether it's getting referrals to specialists, getting the PET scan that you need to get yourself into the trial, or just getting a caregiver who can go to the trial with you. And the people that we have here, who actually I've just met some of them for the first time, happy to be able to have this opportunity, have been really making strides on different dimensions of breaking down these barriers, whether it's through creating registries, doing blood-based biomarker in community settings, or doing remote cognitive assessments. And so we're going to hear from all of them today about what they're doing to kind of close this gap. I'm going to read a little bit about them, but you have to look them up if you want the full details, because otherwise we'll be here all night, because they're really an esteemed group of people. So we have Doris Molina-Henry, who actually is my partner in crime on some things. And she is from the Alzheimer's Therapeutic Research Institute. Dr. Molina-Henry is an associate professor of research neurology at Keck and co-associate lead for the Recruitment, Engagement, and Retention Unit of ACTC. And she has really played a pivotal role in the APT web study, which she'll talk about today, but also, and I hope she'll talk about it, in pilot testing the feasibility of plasma biomarker collection. You didn't bring your kit. We also have Dr. Roy Yari from Eli Lilly and Company. He's actually, down there. I'll change the order. We have Eric Anderson of Synapticure, who's a neurologist and the chief medical officer at Synapticure, a company that is at the forefront of bringing virtual care to individuals living with neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's and related dementia. Eric and his team have been exploring how to simplify and increase access for patients to diagnostic tools. Next to him, we have now Roy Yari, also a neurologist, medical director at Lilly, and prior to this was the director of the Memory Disorders Clinic of Banner Alzheimer's Institute. Roy has been involved with many of the late-stage clinical trials at Lilly, including the Trailblazer 3 study for donanemab in preclinical AD. And finally, at the end there, we have Jeff Burns from the University of Kansas Medical Center. He is the Edward Hashinger Professor of Medicine and the co-director of the University of Kansas Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. He also leads one of 4 sites in the US selected to be part of the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative Program on Accurate Diagnosis, running an implementation study of how to place blood-based biomarkers in real-world clinical practice. So these panelists really together represent academia, clinical, and industry environments and are going to give us their vision and experience on how to provide solutions to these barriers that we love to talk about. So we're going to kick things off by having them each give some prepared remarks. Then I'll start off with a couple questions, and we can open it up, and you guys can ask them questions. So Doris, would you like to take it from here?
Sounds great. Thank you. I'm not the one that you haven't met before, clearly. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of the work that we've been doing. I have the pleasure of working with Paul Azen and a number of individuals in this room that are at the Alzheimer's Therapeutic Research Institute, where we have invested a lot of time and effort really thinking through how can we navigate these issues that are riddling the field at this time, particularly around encouraging participation in trials, but ensuring that individuals that are at higher risk or at disproportionate risk for the disease are also included in these populations to enhance the potential for generalizability. And one of our avenues of doing this has been through the introduction, a long time ago now, of the Alzheimer's Prevention Trials, which is a program, in essence, that is allows the longitudinal observation of individuals at the cognitive level. So we offer cognitive assessments that are issued every 3 months or every 6 months at this time, allowing individuals to follow and monitor their cognition, but also enabling us to monitor them at the same time. And through doing so, identifying whether they might be good candidates, particularly for preclinical or prodromal trials. That study in itself has evolved as the field has evolved in recent years. Particularly, initially, we started with a trial-ready cohort that when an individual was identified as being at higher risk for Alzheimer's dementia, and might be a good candidate for a trial, they would be referred to a clinical site, enabling then follow-up testing and determination of their eligibility for screening and possibly participation. With the advent of biomarkers, we have been able, through the support of control, to test pre-screening protocols that involve the use of plasma biomarkers, particularly A-beta 4240, and later now with p-tau217, to determine whether someone is biologically likely to be eligible for a preclinical or prodromal AD study. At this time, we've tested our abilities to enroll them in a preclinical AD study, utilizing the same cutoffs of that study and determining whether they might be a good candidate. It has been a journey. We have learned a lot in this process. The ALZMatch program, which was our pilot and then subsequent scalable test of this type of platform for feasibility, was a success. We engaged numerous individuals out of 60,000 individuals that are currently enrolled, and that has offered us the opportunity to see whether they are likely to go and be tested at a remote lab. So a lot of these processes enable the remote testing, the cognitive testing remotely from the comfort of your home, and then invitation to a local lab that an individual can attend to in their vicinity, and then minimizing the burden if someone is not likely to be eligible to move to that next stage, but also in enabling or minimizing the burden at the site level of individuals that are not likely to be at that high level of burden. We have also utilized this platform as an opportunity to test a number of strategies, because one of the challenges that we continue to have, and also an area of opportunity for us, is ensuring that not only are we scaling the recruitment overall for these trials, but also that we are ensuring that we're engaging populations that are underrepresented. And that remains a challenge, particularly even in remote testing. We think that we still have opportunities. We've tested, and as Marie knows, and this is where our work together initiated, the provision of financial incentives. We are currently testing engagement strategies through new cognitive assessments, and our work continues, and we see a lot of promise through this mechanism, but of course, as the times evolve, so are we. And so there are new things in the horizon that we hope to evaluate.
So thanks for having me at this meeting. I just wanted to let everybody know kind of what we're doing with the telemedicine model that we've built. So Synapticure was founded by a patient and caregiver based on the patient and caregiver experience to try to reach specifically underserved populations and people who otherwise don't have access to care, which is largely the neurodegenerative population. It's based on the experience of a caregiver and a patient, and so we have devised everything around that. And I think it provides an interesting opportunity to recruit people specifically for clinical trials. And so I'll just talk a little bit about that. So I think we made a conscious decision to utilize telemedicine as our primary model for reaching people. And that was because, again, the lack of availability of advanced centers for everybody in America. And so when we talk about neurology deserts, I think what we're talking about is the collision of three realities, which is an aging population, a shrinking neurology workforce, and geographic areas where memory care is relatively just unavailable. And so we built this specifically to address this challenge by using a teleneurology not as a method of convenience, but rather as an infrastructure for access. Now, our approach starts with a national door, which is a virtual neurology service, and that's where everyone can kind of come into our program. We're licensed across 50 states and have subspecialized neurologists on staff who see patients, along with a multidisciplinary clinic, so that everything could be under one roof and we don't have this issue with silos. So patients enter through a structured remote pathway that includes a full neurologic evaluation, an interview with family and caregivers, standardized functional and cognitive assessments that are adapted specifically for telemedicine use, and a comprehensive diagnostic synthesis. Now, importantly, this model was built not as a transactional model where it's just a one and done. We built this specifically to foster longitudinal relationships so that we could drive engagement and retention of patients into the program. And so every patient is paired with a care coordinator or care navigator, and when needed, we have behavioral health and other ancillary services that we wrap around patients that we see. And all of this is delivered virtually. Now, we also integrate with local services, including labs and imaging. We help navigate insurance. We package care plans to existing care teams, which tend to be primary care providers who end up being the de facto memory providers in neurology deserts. Now, our belief, this is all predicated on our belief, which is that geography should not dictate whether or not someone gets good cognitive care. And so that's the access issue that we're trying to address. Now, the biggest issues or access issues to telehealth or barriers to telehealth kind of fall into three different buckets. So first of all, on the patient side, the issues are the digital divide that people are pretty familiar with, sensory impairments like hearing, language access, and inconsistent caregiver support. On the clinician side, it tends to be around skepticism, around diagnostic accuracy or validity, combined with overwhelming time pressure imposed by our administrative teams. And at the system level, we also deal with a lot of fragmented RCM programs, reimbursement models, and electronic records that don't talk to each other, that create a lot of technological friction in seeing patients. And so what we've learned to address this is that technology doesn't necessarily seem to be the barrier as much, not anymore. There's a lot of off-the-shelf products that people use that are ubiquitous, like cell phones and tablets, et cetera, but rather what it is it's workflow changes that we've adopted, and that we find that telehealth really works when we remove the burden and the onus from the patient and the caregiver and the clinician in order to make these visits happen. So what we do is we end up front-loading tech onboarding to patients and caregivers to eliminate clinician visits where people are just trying to troubleshoot technology. We rely on standardized templated cognitive tools so clinicians aren't creating new exams on every visit. And we use team-based care, so medical assistants, care navigators, care coordinators, insurance navigators that handle logistics, data collections, so that neurologists can remain focused on clinical synthesis and diagnosis rather than troubleshooting issues. And so when these workflows, we think, are designed intentionally, telehealth becomes natural for both providers and for families, and it becomes a well-accepted mechanism for seeing people and bringing them in. And so I think this experience that people have when they come through our program has enormous implications for clinical trial recruitment. So first of all, this teleneurology model creates a national early-stage detection funnel, which includes rural and underserved communities that have been historically underrepresented in trials. Secondly, every visit that we have generates trial-relevant data, making pre-screening more accurate and reducing site screen fail rates. And third, we embed trial discussion into routine care rather than isolating it into research-only workflows, because patients already have a trusting relationship with their care team. And so with this longitudinal relationship, we're able to broach the topic of clinical trials so that there isn't drop-off on these handoffs. And so the result is that we have fewer cold referrals and better warm handoffs, and patients who are more clinically appropriate and prepared for clinical trials are brought into the program. And so the big takeaway for me is basically that when virtual cognitive care is designed for access and equity, it enables clinical trial recruitment. And telehealth is not lowering the bar or rigor, it's actually raising the ceiling for access.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak in this panel today. It's really an honor to be here. I work at Eli Lilly on the Trailblazer ALZ 3 program. It's testing donanemab in preclinical Alzheimer's disease. It's a decentralized trial. You may have heard my colleague this morning, Karen Holdridge, give an excellent presentation on recruitment and screening today. If you haven't seen it, I would strongly urge you to take a look at it if you're interested. It was very well done and probably will answer a lot of your questions. We screened over 63,000 people, as Paul pointed out. It was a huge number for this study. He pointed out during the panel earlier, not right now. So we did have some success in that regard. There are still a lot of learnings and a lot of gaps that need to be bridged. So one of the first gaps I'll start out with is with regard to education. Education foremost on the participant level, or the prospective participant level. I think the participants really need to be aware of how important they are. I mean, if they don't know it, they really need to be told, and they probably need to be told several times. We can't do it without them. Their time, their efforts, we need them. We're not going to advance the science without them. So if that's not told to them, that's a miss, and that really should be, and it should be repeated to them. Also, with regard to education, is something that came up in the Q&A at the panel earlier today, I believe by Jim Taylor. We brought up education of the biomarkers. A lot of participants who come into these studies don't know what this means. What is a positive plasma p-tau217 or an amyloid PET scan? So I think that needs to be explained in a way that they can understand, and perhaps also, especially in the preclinical realm, what that means with regard to progressing to symptomatic stages of disease for them. So hopefully that can motivate them more to enter the study, commit to the study, and be in the study for the long haul. I think also there should be more education on the part of the specialists and other healthcare providers with regard to educating prospective participants about clinical trials. For any disease state. It really should be part of routine management of any prospective participant or patient in the clinic to supplement their current treatment. Hey, there's this thing called clinical trials. You might be interested. You might not be, but if you are interested, let me help you point you in the right direction for that. So that's education. And then another area is reducing the barriers. So in Trailblazer ALZ 3, being a decentralized study, we tried to really lower the burden for the participants to enter the study and make it not as much of a time commitment. I mean, it's a long study, but with regard to time commitment on the cognitive assessments and driving in and making things more convenient for them. So we have remote cognitive assessments in the study. So the long battery of cognitive assessments is done via a tablet remotely. They don't have to come in, drive into the site for that. They could do it from the convenience of their own home at a time that's convenient for them. We use a blood biomarker for not only for screening, but really for our inclusion criteria. So we didn't have amyloid PET for inclusion. We don't have CSF for inclusion. We do have amyloid PET as a sub-study, which is optional for those who want to opt into it. So we'll have that data. But we were able to screen a large amount of people in a relatively short period of time because of the blood-based biomarker, which also enabled us to go out into the communities, which I guess I'll get to in a moment. And I apologize for relying on my notes here, but I learned how to speak only with PowerPoint slides, so I apologize. So we also provided flexible locations for people to come get their MRIs and to get their labs. So they don't have to come into the central site to have all their testing done, but we had a lot of other places where people could go to make it more convenient for them. And so I think we were able to open up the funnel pretty wide for this study. We use a very broad outreach with social media and community screening. And we also use our mobile research units, which is basically a clinic on wheels that can be brought to health fairs or other community screenings as available. And we can begin the screening process with the mobile research units and also the education process. There is a bit of a balance with regard to the decentralization and the personalization. So one thing that we learned, and we did lose a little bit on the Trailblazer-ALZ 3, is because people are home doing their assessments and they're not coming into the clinic, well, we heard that people kind of want to come in sometimes. And some people want to meet with the study staff and the personnel and feel like they're part of something. So building in that flexibility for those who want to remain decentralized, you can, but for those who want to come in, they can. I think having that flexibility is important as well. So with that, I'll pause, but the study is fully enrolled and ongoing at this time.
Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it. And I'll talk about two things that we're doing that I think are, or they're a pathway to really unlocking the health system and the data in the health system to help us recruit. I'd say these efforts are really focused on developing new models of care, but as Paul put it, they're also something that I think will help us create new models of recruitment for clinical trials. So the two things are, the first is the effort that we're doing in collaboration with the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, which is a new way to think about how do we diagnose, how do we implement blood biomarkers, and how do we get primary care involved. And we've had great success. I'll tell you about that in a second. And then the second thing is we've got something we call our Brain Health Biobank. And what it is basically as people come through the clinic or clinics, we're expanding it to multiple clinics now, we're asking them to sign consent. Is the hardest part of the whole deal. The consent's very simple. Basically, all they got to do is click a box. But the consent provides us with the ability to use all their data in the medical record and capture samples as they move through the lab and contact them for future research. They don't have to do anything, and actually key design element to this is they don't have to do anything, and we're not going to ask them to do anything other than maybe recruit them for studies. So we're putting those two things together, which are this whole new effort to really get primary care, and then in our memory care as well, use blood biomarkers. So we partnered with Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, and in April, after a year of effort, we turned on the p-tau217 within our health system. We basically took away all the friction for ordering a blood biomarker, put the order in our EPIC system. Blood's drawn at a local lab, flows through a research lab that's CLIA certified, and results came back, 24 hours later, actually 6 hours later in some cases, which created a problem early on. But it completely reduced the friction and see what happens. Now, we didn't just do that. Around that, we have education, we have tools in the EPIC system for the primary care docs to follow, a script in a way. To get a good history, order the right tests, and basically feel a little more supported and empowered in terms of what are they going to do with the information and where are the patients going to go and all that. And we've redesigned our memory clinic as well so that there's not just one door in, there's multiple doors in, there's a treatment clinic, there's a support clinic for patients who have a clear diagnosis and are sort of on that pathway dealing with Alzheimer's. There's a complex diagnosis clinic, which is sort of the traditional memory clinic, and then we have an e-consult service as well. So we're trying to create this sort of holistic ecosystem where primary care feels supported and empowered to actually make a diagnosis on their own and then deal with the patient. So and they're doing it in a way where the data is fairly homogeneous or collected in a sort of fairly homogeneous way, which creates this great opportunity for our biobank. As that blood flows through the lab, if we get consent, we can capture blood and do our own measures and create an opportunity for biomarker work, and then use the clinical data from the system. And that's sort of our approach right now. And I think we need to study more. How do we really unlock the data that we're getting? I'll tell you, the success with the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative is from April to about October, we had about 1,500 orders placed from over 100 clinicians across our health system, including 70 to 75 primary care docs. So biomarkers are here to stay. They're going to be everywhere. It's good data to help with recruitment. So how do we unlock that, and sort of activate that data? And, so we have an IRB-approved biobank. That's what we're using. It's hard, but it's much simpler than what we do on the research side. But it gives us that ability to contact patients, look at their data, harness that data to understand who they are, what their diagnosis is, and then recruit them. So new models of recruitment and new models of care. But I would say we really do need to look hard and think, does it require a biobank to really capture and sort of activate this data so that we can use it for recruitment? At our place right now, that's what we're doing. But it may be there's lots of other innovative ways to do it that require maybe less IRB oversight, et cetera. So, but we got to stick to the regulations and the ethics and et cetera. So there's a lot to think about.
So you've all told us about what you're doing right now. What do you see amongst the things either you're doing right now or things you see elsewhere that is really the big opportunity in your mind for bridging the gap between getting people from the clinic into clinical trials? What are you excited about today?
How do we harness the power of these health systems? I know there's efforts around the country now with biobanks, which is really an incredible opportunity to get blood for, in clinical care, harness the medical record for the data that we need. But it's incredibly challenging. We've been working on it for 3 years and we're not there. We have over 1,000 people who've signed consent in our memory clinic. We have 600-700 samples. So we're in a good position, but how do you turn the chaos of a medical record into the story that you need to know who the patient is and what their diagnosis is? And there's a challenge every step of the way. But it's something, we solve it in one place, we can solve it at all the others, pretty much. So
maybe I'll go next. I think nowadays we're able to have such a wide reach with social media and reach people in a way that we never were before able to. And we're able to widen our geographies not only that way, but also using the blood-based biomarker and making things more accessible. So I think that is a huge step forward, and hopefully future advancements will improve upon that.
I'll say that much to what you had mentioned in your opening remarks about integrating clinical trial recruitment into standard clinical care so that pathway becomes a lot smoother is something that I see. And then I think that, and we may talk about this more, is the advent of patients and caregivers utilizing AI much more frequently. I think it's like more than 50% of Americans are using AI, and maybe I think it's like 30%, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people are using it on a weekly basis. And so I know that like one thing that we're doing, and I know others are doing as well, is optimizing our search optimization specifically for AI. So AI optimization or generative search optimization to drive people who are looking for specific memory issues or memory things towards resources that we have available.
I'll add to that. I think for me, it's the convenience, accessibility of blood biomarkers and our potential for optimizing our ability to capture that in remote settings, in challenging in settings that have not traditionally been represented. But in addition to that, also the knowledge that we are acquiring at this time related to these biomarkers, what we're learning across populations because of the accessibility, because of our ability to now capture disease and at different stages, but also in different populations that help us understand a little bit better why we have had some barriers in the past and limitations or bottlenecks of enrolling some populations, and some of it may not necessarily be logistical access or trust, but in some cases biological. And our understanding of that is really imperative in how we move forward, particularly at the much earlier stages of the disease. And that, coupled with some of what Dana shared earlier, I think it's going to be our one of our best bets.
So I want to follow up with one question, and then I will open it up, which is that, especially when you mentioned social media, this raises for me the issue of inclusion, and representation is the new version of this. Are there trade-offs that we face here when we use different approaches that may increase our N? Do we risk challenges on the representation side of the trial?
So I can speak to that from our experience in Trailblazer ALS 3, and my colleague Karen Holdred showed some of the data today with regard to representation. We did fairly well with regard to screening with underrepresented populations. However, it did not translate into randomization at all. So we had one success and one not success. And we understand some of the reasons for that, but not fully. In part, the screen fails on the blood-based biomarker and also on our cognitive inclusion criteria. But there is more to learn to improve.
I'm going to let Doris.
If I can follow that, because we were, Dr. Ramaraman presented on the same session this morning, and we really talked about both Trailblazer ALS 3 as well as the AHEAD 3-4-5 studies, which are both focused on the same population, and our experience really with social media, earned media, and other initiatives that we implemented in the context of the study. And what we found was that social media wasn't our biggest opportunity. We found that our biggest opportunity was when individuals saw the investigator team talk to the public. Opportunities to be in outlets where individuals felt most trust and felt more compelled to listen and to hear from individuals that they've been listening from and getting their news from on a regular basis. We would see routinely huge spikes every time we had opportunities to interact with those folks, and we saw greater opportunity, potentially mostly in this age group, that seemed to bridge the gap of subpopulations simply because we were really tailoring this to reaching the population that outlet was aimed at. And so we found great opportunity in that, coupled with social media to have a sustained entry. But I think that's the availability also of a central pre-screener, where once you heard it on the news, you could immediately go in and sign up and indicate, I'm interested. We saw quite a bit of engagement and response to that approach.
Anyone else, or before we open it up?
I guess somebody mentioned the neurology desert, and Kansas is one, and it's a huge state. But if you think about the tools that are coming about today, but blood biomarkers, digital cognitive testing, AI, this is an opportunity, I think, to really overcome the access problem. I think, and we're working on this, that we can replace cognitive or put cognitive neurology in Western Kansas and put neuropsychology in Western Kansas, where there are no neurologists, using AI tools, using digital cognitive testing, and blood biomarkers. And virtual connections too. Yes, we've got to keep our eye on the representation and inclusivity, but at the same time, I think a lot of these tools are actually breaking down the barriers, and we need to use them right so that we're overcoming these access challenges and making sure we're reaching everybody. And that's our goal, is how do we get everybody in our state access to these new tools And I think for the first time, we can do it.
Greg Jica, University of Kentucky, and I just want to say, as boots in the ground, working in the clinic, working with patients, and I've spent a lot of time recruiting people into the APT web study, into other sponsor-initiated remote screenings, and what I get back from the majority of folks, and you know how few, Roy, how few of the folks that you reached out to and connected with you actually used for your trial. They come back and say, no, they told me that they didn't want me. They feel used, they feel rejected, and trying to get them back into another study, I'm doing damage control. Here. We need to, I don't know, Roy, you can comment. Did you guys send out there all these other studies recruiting? And so somebody wasn't eligible for your study because their MMSE was too low or their screening test was too low. Did you send them to other studies, or did you want to keep them in your pocket for whatever Lilly may do in the future? And Doris, I'll pose the same question to you. When people were not eligible for the AHEAD study from APT, did you send them over to Trailblazer 3? We need to break down these silos, and we need to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel with every one of these remote outreaches. We're breaking down barriers, we're taking patients, we're crumbling them up, and we're throwing them away. And that's a bigger problem than getting the whole thing started from the get-go. So I'd really love comments on this. How do we break down those silos? How do we start working together? How do we really join as a field with all of these different outreach programs? We need to do this because I think we already cumulatively have the patients and the resources to fill every trial if we just pull together now.
Thank you so much for that question, because this is one of those things that we continue to think about, and we've heard from you, we've heard from other PIs, we hear it from participants. One of the advantages of doing this through APT is that there's a circle that individuals that were not eligible for a trial can come back and still remain in the study and be offered opportunities. And our hope is to move in that direction in the future, where not only are they enrolled through a master protocol for multiple trials that we host, but possibly other studies that are available for them, because at the end of the day, we recognize that this is for the participant, that to be a participant-centric platform, we need to make sure that we provide the options that they are eligible for and not exclusively those that we have created and carved. And so we recognize that that's an important issue to address. In the interim, one of the ways that we see this, and we're seeing this now as we are planning to launch another trial, is that those individuals that were not eligible for a trial like AHEAD, which was our initial study, where we tested this approach through the pre-screener ALS match, that those individuals have been in our system, that they will be the first ones to be prioritized, to be reached out and referred to the study if they meet the criteria. But I also think that we need to do a better job of making sure that the perception of eligibility or ineligibility is shifted, that when individuals hear that they are not a good fit for a study, that's all they hear, that they don't hear that they're rejected, that they don't hear that they are not, in some instances, it could be a good thing. But that's also not what we want to say, but.
I just wanted to address that a bit. Greg, we've heard this from you, and we've heard this from many people, that they react to a positive finding of no amyloid in brain by feeling rejected. And so we've clearly not constructed our system well. I think that we're working on language, and we're getting a lot of input, and Doris is leading this effort, and we're going to change all the language. We're also making a big effort to make our platform more engaging, and we're working with Gates Ventures and their new digital engagement platform to simply make people feel more connected to the whole field through the web interface, and that'll help. But here's what I really think we should do now is we just learned the results, in the last few months of the Pointer study. So the Pointer study says that anybody who is not because they're amyloid positive, but because they're getting older, and like most people, they have high blood pressure or other risk factors, so they're worried. Anybody who engages with a multimodal lifestyle program has a cognitive benefit. We have this new result from Pointer. When someone doesn't qualify for an amyloid-reducing trial, we should be sharing the results of studies that have proven there are methods to protect your brain and improve cognition for people who are not selected because they have amyloid and the amyloid needs to be treated. So in other words, we should take better advantage of our engagement and share much more, including constructive advice for people who are not coming into our trials, and give them that advice even as we try to maintain engagement so we can offer additional studies.
Murray, there's a question.
So I don't have anything to add to what Paul and Doris said. It's a gap, and it should be worked on, and I'm sorry that that's a message that prospective participants get that should be remedied.
Panel, thanks for being here. My name is AJ Rosenthal. I'm with a company called General Genomics. We're an artificial intelligence bioinformatics company. And my question for you guys is, given the variability we're seeing in CTAD and biomarkers, ARIA risk, demographic representation, do you think a multimodal synthetic cohort could help sponsor model clinic trial enrollment, potentially identifying which types of participants are most likely to qualify, enroll, and then ultimately benefit before the therapy or even the trial begins?
I can tell you that based on my experience with our statistics team, you can model just about anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the reality. I think that it would be a useful exercise. But what we find is that in the real world scenario, there are numerous obstacles and barriers in addition to the variability that we've seen presented in the studies. And some of these barriers are logistical, can't often be modeled as clearly. We anticipated a lower screen fail rate in one of our studies, and that screen fail rate went 10% higher than expected to 90% screen fail rate. So out of every 100 participants, you lost 93 and only landed with 7, and that was the result of modeling. So I think that yes, it's a valuable exercise. It does give you a good sense of where you're headed, but I think you should also plan to anticipate some of the other logistical barriers and things that we're learning, particularly with newer novel biomarkers and new avenues of utilizing them as they're integrated. I hope that can just add.
I made Doris talk, so I'll say, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but I think if we have engagement platforms that keep people, with us, and we work very hard at that, and we have visibility into their phenotype and their biomarkers, and we have AI tools to sort of surface those people when we need them to recruit, I think that day is coming, and it will help accelerate recruitment greatly.
Thank you. This is what a phenomenal panel and discussion. I just really appreciate it. I wanted to make one quick comment and then one question. The comment is, I heard the laugh in terms of somebody just gets told there's no amyloid in their brain. A lot of those people have dementia. It's that they have Lewy body, they have vascular dementia, they have FTD. So I'm Penny Dex with AFTD. We have people calling our helpline telling us, I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and then I tested negative on an amyloid test. Now I'm told I have FTD, what do I do? So I would add that in this context, when you're thinking what you do when somebody is not eligible, remember that there are resources. LBDA is a phenomenal organization. AFDD has a portfolio of resources that you can give someone to say, hey, if you think you don't have amyloid, you may have something else, and there are resources out there to help you. Our field is drastically far behind where the Alzheimer's field is. We did have our first FTD progranulin genetic variant phase 3 clinical trial read out this fall, and we heard it was not positive, so that asset's not continuing. And I heard a lot from a lot of our community members saying, do you regret participating? Should you never have been in this trial? And I wanted to follow up with the comment that was earlier about trust, about like you get these people activated. We are in such a sensitive time in our society where trust in science is really low. And I think the level of investment that we've had in neurodegenerative disease, and frankly, not seeing the return that people want, and maybe that was totally unrealistic of how easy it would be to tackle these diseases. We know how hard everybody's blood, sweat, and tears have been going into creating treatments. But that's the reality we face. So I just wanted to follow up, just in general, when you are working with these communities, how are you intentional about creating trust with science?
Great question. I mean, we try to lead with service. We try to lead with something of value to the community or those individuals to build that relationship and trust and serve them, and then we ask them to participate in trials. So, but I think it's incredibly important. We're not just asking people to participate; that we're leading with service to the community and service to the patients and their families. And that builds trust, and it also builds sort of durability to continue to keep building and getting better about recruiting and spreading the word about what you're doing.
I'll just kind of weigh in there for a minute, just because I think it's a very important point that you make, and you as well, as far as being rejected. And I will say that, our organization started in ALS, and because of that, we ended up having a lot of folks with FTD, and then moved on to other things. And people would come to us specifically looking for clinical trials, and if they couldn't get in, sometimes they would just ghost us and they would be gone. But I think, the way we have positioned ourselves is as a clinical organization first, and something that's specifically based around the patient caregiver experience. And so I think that for the majority of people, the communication is extremely important. For people to not hear that they were not accepted into a trial, I think is probably not appropriate, right? Like we have a responsibility when we're taking on trust from these people to bring that back. And to your point, I think that another thing that we deal with, starting in the ALS population, FTD, et cetera, is that we get a lot of people who come to us who are on all sorts of very strange regimens that they've picked up from social groups or whatever. There is a particularly offensive group in Florida that cooks people in an oven, literally, to activate heat shock proteins. And we try to have very delicate conversations with these people. But I think that one thing that we hear time and time again is that they will come to a center of excellence or something like that, and they will come in with all this research that they've done because they're desperate. And I think that they're kind of at their wits' end, and they'll often be summarily dismissed because they're like, I don't have time to deal with all this stuff, and they feel like the system is failing them. And so what we've tried to build in is time to listen and reflect and be open to a lot of these things, insofar as they do not cause them harm, right? So, I mean, if there are things like someone's like, I want to take a trip in the oven for $10,000, we're like, that's probably a bad idea, but if they say, I want to be on these supplements, I mean, that may be okay. And so, but to your point, I think a lot of it is communication and not dismissing people and giving them the respect and the time that they need. I think it goes a long way.
Thank you all so much for your engaging questions and for the amazing panelists. Control is really dedicated to creating evidence around all of this. So we all have all these stories about people coming in and being really frustrated about being rejected from a trial. Our goal is to really understand, well, how can we keep them engaged? What is the evidence to support your idea that taking them to a platform, does that actually work? And then does it move the needle towards actually recruiting them eventually to a trial? So we're really excited about work that we both are doing in-house, but also funding. And you will hear shortly from some pilots that we are considering for funding from our subsequent round around AI-driven approaches, AI and machine learning. So we hope you will continue to follow us as we build out this evidence for how to improve the pipeline from the clinic to clinical trials and build on all the exciting work in disease-modifying therapies that don't just work for people who are amyloid positive, but have dementia of another type and find benefits there. Thank you so much.
We are moving into the place where you are going to help drive some of the next activities and funding of the Clinical Trial Recruitment Laboratory. So as you heard, we have funded several pilots already, and we opened an RFA middle of the year, and we had over 30 5 applicants, I think, and you're going to hear from the finalists today. You're going to have a chance to vote on those finalists, which is why you're getting out your phone. We want the audience feedback. Now, we are going to do this non-scientific. Am I supposed to say all this? Okay, I'm not going to say any of this. So there's a QR code there if you can't find it. The goal of this particular RFA was around technology. And so I'm really happy to bring up my new partner in crime, Tom Stocky, who's here representing Gates Ventures. He's an expert in AI and machine learning and technology, and he's going to tell us why he thinks technology is a good place to be focusing right now.
For me, I was looking at these the pitches that you're about to hear from, and I think the trend that you'll notice in all of them is the increasing role that software and in particular machine learning and AI have to play in the clinical trials ecosystem. So, we're getting smarter about who we recruit to trials, how we recruit them to trials, how we screen them, how we administer the trials, how we analyze the data. And personally, I am increasingly optimistic about the pace of progress in this area, in all of these areas. And so the folks you're going to hear from in a minute, we've got 6 great teams coming up here. All of them have a role to play in each of those areas. And so, I hope you're as excited as I am about seeing all that they have done.
Yeah, so this is why it's going to feel different. I have a timer. Remember the Gong Show? They are going to get 5 minutes and 1 slide. They have to stop talking when the timer goes off, and then we're going to ask them a couple of questions, okay? So once again, this is going to feel different, and we need you guys to help bring the energy, because when you tell someone that they're going to speak in front of a whole bunch of folks that they don't know that are experts in this field, and they've got 5 minutes and 1 slide, it can be a little nerve-wracking. So we need you to bring your warm energy for all of them. So starting off, we are going to bring up Colin Depp from the University of California, San Diego. Please welcome Colin.
Thank you. Really welcome to San Diego. I'm from UC San Diego myself, and I'm a professor there, and I'm going to be giving you my pitch on a digital health platform for a faster, more inclusive Alzheimer's trial. So really the 3 big barriers that we're going after are the cost and time involved in trials, the extent to which they are able to be inclusive, and then also the extent to which they are fast. And so we are proposing a solution that uses digital health that combines our mobile cognitive tests that are delivered on mobile devices with surveys that are delivered on the mobile phone, with the patient portal and the EMR patient portals that people use every day. The goal here is to use tools that people already use, and we're going to be delivering these in English and in Spanish, given the rising number of Spanish-speaking older adults, particularly in this region. So some of our strengths are that we have a really great team that's composed of neuropsychologists, informaticians, I practiced that, and informatics experts, as well as people who are also with the community. And so we've engaged them in a research plan that involves a couple of different stages, and I can describe those if you're interested in. But the goal here is really to also partner with a company so that this can be scalable. So we're working with a company called NeuroUX, and they've been deployed in 51 medical centers, and so they're quite active in being able to deliver mobile cognitive tests in a relatively scalable fashion. We've addressed a number of challenges, which include things like the extent to which we're able to pass through regulatory channels, as well as the extent to which we're able to create tools that can be then ported to other settings. And we're trying to use machine learning in this project, not so much to predict who's has the disease, but who's eligible and who's interested. And so thinking about all the data you can get from a medical record and cognitive testing to figure out who's likely to be interested, and then potentially, if not, why not? And so some of the opportunities here, I think, are to be able to create a registry for a clinical trial at UCSD that we could then expand and think about work with other Epic and maybe moving beyond Epic, other medical record systems that could be capable of participating in multi-site trials. We could also have, I think, really open the window for how do we engage Spanish-speaking older adults in projects of various types. And then I think ultimately the impact that we're trying to have is to be able to create a trial infrastructure and a platform that could enable more inclusive trials that could potentially be ported to not just Alzheimer's, but to other cognitive conditions as well. So I think I've still got some time left. Or one more time. Yeah. Thank you.
You mentioned the UCSD registry. How are you going to refer patients into clinical trials and measure success about whether patients actually enroll?
Yeah, and so I think in this study, we're is a pilot study. So we're going to look at what proportion of the population who receives messages and invitations to participate actually participate in an initial screening around sort of what they essentially would want to participate, their intentions to participate in different research. So we're not actually enrolling people in trials in this case, but then we're going to identify a subset of participants and then see if they would engage in a more of a longitudinal kind of registry study where they'll be developing or using the tests and measures on their own devices. And so I think from that cohort of people, we would then be able to measure the rate of people who would be interested in trials. But I think one theme from this talk is that we really need to know a lot more about why is it that people decide not to decide to participate in trials and at what points in the whole process. And so I think this approach will help us get there.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, so I had a similar question actually. So I remember that you were saying you're going to send out that survey using my chart to like 10,000 people, and you were expecting a response rate of like 5 to 10% based on passing. I was wondering, have you thought about using like re-engagement techniques or other tactics to try to increase that response rate?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of because my chart is, serves a function, I think the idea is to not, really spam people, but I think this is an interesting question is how else could you try to engage people beyond that? That rate of 5% in terms of research projects that we've had has been pretty stable in terms of people ultimately converting and being interested in research. And obviously, I'd love to figure out ways of increasing that rate, but I think I worry a little bit about a lot of additional on top of that because I think that would be bothering people at that point. Yeah.
Thank you, Colin. Okay, everybody give Colin a big round of applause for going first. Okay. Next up, we have Vijaya. Vijaya is going to talk about a partnership actually between Cognimark and Ochin. So I'm going to start you. Go.
Good evening. My name is Vijay Kolachalama. I'm an associate professor of medicine and computer science in a warm place called Boston. But here I'm today to represent Cognimark and Ochin, along with my collaborator, Dr. Erika Cottrell. We are talking about this exciting project called AI-driven recruitment of underserved patients for AD trials and beyond. Our significant strengths are that we are addressing, or at least trying to address, diagnostic gaps through interpretable AI systems embedded within community primary care settings to improve access and equity for low-income, rural, and underserved populations receiving specifically care in federally qualified health centers that are across the nation. Our team has a lot of strengths. So one of the key strengths is that we have multiple years of experience managing multi-site clinical trials and also integrating EHR data across different systems. Currently, our systems are already integrated at 2 primary care sites, one in Rhode Island, one in Washington, D.C. area, catering to about 50,000 patients. So we already have some proof of concept where traditional neurology workup data as well as traditional EHR data has already been integrated into these systems. Our work has been published in multiple top-tier journals, including Nature Medicine, where we have not only showed that our AI system is not only capable of accurately assessing Alzheimer's, but also other dementias, including Lewy body dementia and other things, and FTD as well. Another important relationship here is that we are partnering with Ochin, which is a nationally recognized network of FQHCs, which are federally qualified health centers, by a single instance of Epic EHR, which I think is very, very important. And we are expecting some challenges. For example, the integrating AI into these FQHC workflows may face some technical hurdles, especially in terms of understanding and managing staff capacity limits, et cetera. We're also trying to navigate between different IRB approvals across different sites. We also are mindful of the fact that EHR systems are very messy. So during these pilot studies, we are hoping to sort of really understand the nuances with all this unstructured data and seeing how we can meaningfully integrate all these EHR systems into this AI so that it can meaningfully provide some insights. We see phenomenal opportunities here, and I have to really highlight this. Ocean Network has 7 million patients across the nation, and most of them are from rural, underserved populations. This is very, very important, folks, because I think everybody talked about access to care, everybody talked about diversity in clinical trials. We are bringing one of the largest network of patients nationwide, which has 7 million patients around the country, into this single instance of EHR. And you can see here some demographics that we pointed out, which is about 80% publicly insured, 32% Latinx, and 17% Black. And this solution hopefully is going to expand trial inclusion for, again, rural, low-income, and underserved populations. Our technology is super cool. We have a fault-tolerant multimodal AI system that has already been integrated into EHR systems. We already have, like I said, 2 pilot studies ongoing at 2 sites. We are hoping that this is going to enhance early detection beyond traditional biomarker assessments. We are hoping to co-design this with user-centered workflows, especially with patients and staff, offering outreach using MyChart. And then finally, in terms of advancing the field, we are excited because we think that this is going to improve diagnostic precision, increase the trial enrollment rates, reduce screen failures, and cost while addressing disparities in AD research. And we are hoping to deliver these things through validated, fast healthcare interoperability resources, which are pretty standard. And this is a compliant AI framework that we already have adapted into our EHR systems. And finally, we are hoping to establish prototype tools and patient registry for ongoing use in Ocean Network. So the takeaway message here is,
how about that?
Please support us.
Give a round of
Please
applause.
support us.
Stay where you are, Vijay. We've got a couple questions.
The takeaway.
Yeah, Tom, go first.
Yeah, so you talked about Cognitive Mark's ability to identify patients with cognitive decline. So I had 2 questions about that model. One is, can you share a little bit more about its performance? Yeah. And then the other is, I know that it's been trained and it uses like a whole bunch of data inputs, like EHR fields, cognitive testing scores, I think even structural neuroimaging. Do you have intuition around which of those is most important for determining that identification?
So I think it depends on the scenario that you're talking about. For example, if our system is used to assess, let's say somebody has, whether they have healthy cognition or MCI or dementia, you actually don't need a lot of multimodal data. But if you're really trying to understand the etiologies driving this cognitive impairment, then we are hoping that other modalities are actually going to be useful. For example, one of the key insights that we understood is if you're including imaging as well as neuropsychological assessments, we are able to very accurately assess not only the primary etiology driving the cognitive impairment, but also mixed conditions as well.
Okay, so in your proposal for AIM-1, you were planning on building a cohort together with this Ocean data. How are you guys going to measure success for that aim?
So that's a great question. So right now, our hope is to sort of integrate. So it's a single instance of EHR. So if we do one pilot site in one place, we are hoping that can be extended to the entire nation. So the hope here is once we, let's say, take 10,000 patients, then we integrate that into our EHR system. Even if we flag, let's say, 100 of them who are at, let's say, high risk or who are potentially eligible for trials, we are hoping to just basically start really digging down further on those 100 patients and then seeing if we can really define the action items beyond just selecting them, but also trying to understand how we can make, for example, a phone call or maybe bring them back to the clinic or maybe provide that telehealth neurology visit like I think somebody was talking about. So we're trying to really define those action items beyond just selection. And what we're hoping at the end of the pilot study is we can really quantify what action items have been done and how they have been executed.
Thank you. Big applause. All right, next up, we have Miriam Ashford from the University of California, San Francisco. Ready? Go.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Miriam Ashford, and I'm assistant professor at the University of California, San Francisco. And on behalf of my UCSF team, I'm very terrified to be here, but also very excited and very grateful for this opportunity. And I'm really excited to share with you our work on, or our proposal on developing and piloting a generative AI conversational or voice agent, which will help administer research, informed consent, and assess capacity to consent. Both the informed consent and the capacity to consent are critical, but often time and resource consuming steps in the enrollment process, especially in Alzheimer's disease clinical trials. And our goal is quite simple. We are not trying to replace the in-person informed consent, but rather we want to leverage the rapid progress that generative AI is making making to automate these conversations, to offer options in which these conversations can be more efficient, they can be more reliable, and also more accessible by being available anywhere and anytime and multilingual. So we have brought together a team that has been collaborating together, and we have combined deep experience in generative AI, digital assessments, community-engaged research, and 80 clinical trials. And we have already proven that our foundation works. We have developed and tested a voice agent that administers the clinical dementia rating scale, and we have a chat-based prototype agent that administers an informed consent form for an online registry. So we're building on this really solid foundation and also leveraging our UCSF existing resources. This includes the Versa AI platform for our agent, then the large pool of existing participants from the Brain Health Registry for our recruitment into our pilot study. And we are partnering with two existing community science partnership boards to help ensure that the community voices inform the design and the evaluation of our agent. So all this innovation obviously also brings great challenges. And one of our top priorities is ensuring participant safety and privacy. And we're addressing this by, first of all, relying or using a secure and HIPAA-compliant Versa AI platform within the UCSF. We're also applying specialized technological safeguards to prevent errors and hallucinations in the agent's responses. And our project will be reviewed and approved, obviously, by the IRB, but also by the Health AI Oversight Committee at UCSF. There's also other challenges, and one of the big ones is to ensure that our agent works well across different cognitive, linguistic, cultural, or socioeconomic differences. So the agent must feel natural, empathic, or understandable to everyone. And the one way we're addressing this is obviously, like mentioned, we're working with community science partnership boards, but we're also purposefully enrolling a diverse cohort into even our pilot. So these opportunities also has great opportunities. So one of the things we are planning to do is to take a careful stepwise approach in which we'll be iteratively testing and refining our agent using a hypothetical informed consent form. So this will allow us to optimize acceptability and usability in a low-risk setting before trying it in a more high-risk setting like an actual clinical trial. There's also broader opportunity, right? The public's comfort with AI constantly is growing, and then the rapid advances will keep making these conversations more natural, more empathic, and hopefully more culturally aware. So ultimately, we believe that this flexible nature, the multilingual capacity, the remote capacity can make informed consent more accessible and thereby increase representation in clinical trials. So in terms of advancing the fields, we believe that we can transform research and how research teams obtain informed consent in traditional, but especially in decentralized.
Okay, give Miriam a big round of applause. Miriam, you had no reason to be terrified. You did a great job. So I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
What are your plans for making your tool accessible to others? Are you planning on making it public, open access? Are you thinking about commercialization? How do we make sure that it gets outside of UCSF?
That's a really great point. So, I didn't make it to there, obviously. So I was trying to say that in terms of replicability and scalability, we really want to create a plug-and-play tool that will be able to offer to other people that they can easily adapt for their own informed consent process, but also other procedures as well. That could be screening, assessment, or other participant communications. So I think that's a really important part. And we have done this with the Brain Health Registry as well, where we're able to offer our services to other people.
Great, thank you. Tom.
That actually segues nicely into the question I had, which was about the other things that it could be used for. How hard would it be to adapt it to be used for recruitment as well, like a voice agent that could reach out to prospective candidates and actually convince them to join the study?
Yeah, I think that's kind of our point, right? We've already developed this for the clinical dementia rating scale, and we believe that makes it really easy for us to adjust it for the informed consent form. We are building our whole models in sort of an agnostic way that allows us to be very, using some prompt engineering to change it pretty quickly and using the scripts from different things. So we believe that this is very easily adaptable. And that's a real great part of it.
Thank you, Miriam. Applause for Miriam. Okay, next up we have Michael Carey from Duke University.
Good evening, colleagues. Alzheimer's disease and related dementias affect every community and can impact any family. show of hands, who knows anyone who's been affected? For me, this is personal. My father-in-law, a Vietnam veteran from a rural area in Virginia, lived hours away from specialty care until he moved in with us in North Carolina. And for him and so many others, connection to care and research participation is a huge problem. And so across the country, rural families and people of color and limited English speakers remain underrepresented in Alzheimer's research. And clinicians tell us that they want to connect their patients to research, but because of their busy clinical workloads, that task becomes very difficult. And so that's why we're creating Memory Study Connect, an AI-driven tool that connects patients, families to research so every person can be represented. We're building this tool on top of a number of strengths at Duke. One is our research expertise. I have what we call our dream team of data scientists, clinicians, and community members who have a long-standing track record in developing AI tools and implementing those tools in practice and governing them for fairness. Other strengths are our geographic reach. We have over 100 primary care clinics across urban and rural health centers that will allow us the perfect test bed of our AI tool. Another strength would be our trusted partnerships. And despite what you hear in the media about our rivalries with UNC, we actually have a robust clinical partnership and research partnership with them, as well as other institutions within the state and across the southern region. And so, of course, with innovation, there are challenges. So we know that clinical records, electronic health records, clinical notes are messy, but we have individuals on our team that have more than 20 years of experience managing these data. We know that patients and clinicians are juggling so much, so participation in our study will be brief and flexible. Addressing these realities early on within our program, we think we're positioned for scalable success. And so, from these foundations, there are a number of opportunities to consider. One of those opportunities would be the integration of our tool across 100 different primary care settings, where memory concerns are first recognized. I'll say with this, in terms of advancing the field, we believe that our tool is designed with fairness in mind and the clinical workflow in mind. And so inclusion is no longer an aspiration, but it can become a standard practice. And we believe that...
Way to go, Michael! Everybody clap. Okay, nice job, Michael.
Thank you.
Before you go, we've got a few questions for you.
Okay, so I remember from your proposal that the tool has a machine learning thing that it combs through the EHR data, it identifies good candidates for the trials, and then it generates referral links and engagement materials.
Yes.
My question is, are any of the outputs from that machine learning model used to personalize the engagement materials? Are they used in any way to figure out which engagement materials might work best for this particular patient? Yeah.
Yes, our goal is one of the outputs would be that the patient referrals are personalized. And so we're using our CAB, our Community Advisory Board, to sort of help us tweak what those different culturally aware output materials could look like, will inform our AI tool.
Okay, I'm throwing out my planned question and doing a different one because it's based on the conversation earlier. So this question about telling someone that they don't qualify. So how are you going to talk to someone who potentially has been matched to a trial? Have you thought about how you're going to be able to, and obviously in a culturally aware manner, share with them that they might not qualify for something?
So I don't think that would be a challenge for us, because the goal is that in a patient encounter between a clinician and a potential candidate, that tool is providing transparent prompts to the clinician that lets them know that this patient is a good candidate for a given clinical trial. And then the clinician can invite them. So it won't be a situation where we're telling them that they're not a good candidate. We recognize they're a good candidate for the trial, and then we invite them in.
Thank you. Applause for Michael. Okay, next up, Dawei Lang from Cool Labs in UT Austin.
So our pilot is going to study whether a human-like phone AI, when decide to mimic human communication patterns, can effectively enroll underserved populations into ADRD trials. And yeah, so our pilot is going to be built on a voice AI system that we developed in our lab. And the voice AI is able to talk with participants with all the human-like features, like free-form conversations, like small talks, like human tones, right? And to pursue this pilot, we are going to work with BrainCheck and UT Austin School of Nursing to co-design the AI agent and to integrate into their recruitment workflow to access one of the ongoing ADRD studies in Texas. And we also got additional interest from the University of Kansas ADRC, as well as the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation. And for this pilot, we've also formed a very strong team of researchers with prior experiences at Meta, Samsung Research, BrainCheck, UT Austin, and UC San Diego. And as the PI for this pilot, I was also the 2023 Meta PhD Fellow. And today, human phone communication is already helping many areas, but we know that it's still a relatively new concept for ADRD studies. For many participants and teams, when we talk about phone agents, I guess people's first impression must still be those robot phone calls receiving from IRS or UPS, right? That's why we believe that the outcome of this pilot would be really interesting. How would our target participants react if they can actually receive an AI phone call that can actually talk to them just like a real human staff, right? Can they be converted, right? That's why we hope that this pilot can be a fundamental research for us to discover the gap between AI and human-like communications, as well as to think about the best practices of designing an AI system that mitigates this gap. Today, many participants still rely on the traditional phone channels to learn about study information. But in the same time, we know that many teams are short-staffed and are already overwhelmed, right? That's the real problem we're facing today. Throughout the past 3 years, we've been talking about all the relevant technologies, like large language models, AI voice, AI companions, right? So this is a great opportunity for us to revisit the problem with all the latest technologies. And this pilot is going to be a preliminary co-design and evaluation of the impact of AI phone communications in ADRD studies. And lastly, I would like to just quickly go over our expected deliverables for this pilot. So first of all, it will be more than just for ADRD studies, right? All the findings we're going to get from this pilot, like how the AI is going to mimic human communication patterns, the participants' reactions, including the prototype itself, right? All of these can be generalized to every clinical trials. And second, our expected outcomes for this pilot will include a peer-reviewed publication with all the key findings, as well as an open platform that everyone can use. And lastly, we expect our prototype of this pilot to be a standalone infrastructure. It's going to be very cost-efficient, 24/7 responsive, so that we hope even for teams with the minimal budget can afford it, and they can use it anytime they like, and to reach out to the participants in time. Yeah, so that would be all. Oh, one more thing here. Please come and see our demo if you have not. We actually have an AI voice here. For you
Way to go, Dawei!
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so stay there. And he did bring a demo if you guys want to see it. So my first question for you is, we are a little scared of ChatGPT taking over the world, or these voice agents. You mentioned already what we're used to. Do you have any evidence on why we should believe that this technology can replace human outreach?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to say that this is not going to replace human. Humans are always the most reliable. So that's definitely with no doubt. I feel like there's always a trade-off here, right? Between between the technological reliability as well as the efficiency, right? ChatGPT, for a lot of us, we already see how efficient it's gonna be, right? It can handle all of the conversation, well, most of the conversations, right, in a pretty reliable way. It can actually help to drive the human human power to another level. So definitely that would be the benefit for it. And in terms of the other side of the problem, right, how we are going to actually use it in a safe way, in a reliable way. So there are certain techniques to ensure these, right? We've been talking about the retrieval augmented generation, techniques like that to basically guide the LLM behaviors to be more, I would say, in a more secure way, right? To be more, I would say, basically follow the human instructions, right? So of course, that's also another thing we hope to explore in this pilot. Right? Is it going to be reply to human participants in a safe way, in a reliable way? That's something we hope to explore as well.
Thank you.
I had a similar question about the feasibility thing.
Sure.
So, picking recruitment is a pretty ambitious task, especially since it could easily become unstructured. If you're reaching out to someone. Do you have any prior work you can lean on, particularly for reaching out to elderly patients and people who might be cognitively impaired with MCI?
Yeah, so at this point, we don't really have specific prior work basically for ADRD trials, so for elder participants. But we do have I would say pretty sufficient internal testing for different types of human recruitment, including clinical trials in our lab, because our lab is actually working on automated dietary monitoring. So we basically deployed the tool to recruit a bunch of different participants across different ages to basically let them come to our lab to do blood pressure monitoring, how that would be relevant to their eating behaviors, things like that. So yeah, we do have the prior experience with that to basically to tune the AI agent to, I would say, to be better fit for participants with that group. And that's why we also hope to make use of this opportunity here to explore how it's going to be a good fit for ADRD trials as well. We believe that is going to be the future, but of course, there are a lot of questions for us to explore.
Thank you. Okay, applause for Dawei.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have Lisa Renzi-Hammond from the University of Georgia. Let's welcome Lisa. You ready? Go.
Whoever you are, I love you. Awesome. All right, everyone. It is such an honor to be here with you tonight, what feels like a million miles away from where my own scientific career began. So I was raised in a tiny rural Georgia town of about 3,000 people. And although I lack the traditional stereotypical Southern accent, I assure you I blessed plenty of hearts before earning my degrees from the University of Georgia and eventually ending up as the global manager for adult clinical nutrition science at Abbott Laboratories. So in that role, one of my jobs was to supervise the work of our scientists who conducted clinical trials to support regulatory claims in our brain health space. But site after site, trial after trial, we never collected data in a single town that looked anything like the one where I grew up. And for Alzheimer's disease and brain health, that is a huge problem because rural adults have double the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's disease. But so far, fewer than about 1% of clinical trials have been done with a rural focus. So I took that little kernel of dissatisfaction back to my alma mater and helped found the University of Georgia's Care Center, our rural research hub. I've had about 20 years of experience doing public-private clinical trials, including in rural spaces. And that is CARE's mission, to get out there into our rural communities and bring rural folks back into science. We've been pretty successful in our first 5 years or so of existence. We've been able to collect data in about 90 rural Georgia communities so far. But those successes have not come without significant challenges. First of all, if you are down in rural South Georgia, you might be driving 2 hours to get to a single infusion site or amyloid PET scanner. These are not problems that it's very easy to throw telehealth at in the way we have traditionally done it, because 20% of rural Georgia homes still lack broadband access. Now, Georgia is a wonderful place to consider doing Alzheimer's disease research for terrible reasons. We are in the heart of the dementia belt, but we're also in the heart of the stroke belt, the obesity belt, and the diabetes belts. Without good algorithms to identify those high potential amyloid positive folks, we have a really hard time knowing whether or not we're matching the right folks with the right trials, or whether we're recruiting patients whose dementia symptoms are due to that comorbidity soup, who would therefore be relevant and eligible for other trials. But perhaps more importantly, as we've heard tonight, because rural folks have been left out of the research process for so long, there's a lot of mistrust in science and medicine. We designed our Care Track program to meet each one of these challenges head on. First, we're going to partner with the University of Georgia's Cooperative Extension, which has been serving rural Georgia for more than 120 years. There is an extension faculty member and a building and broadband UGA access in all 159 counties in the state of Georgia. Extension will be hosting our digital data collection kiosks to help us break the digital divide in those communities. Meanwhile, on the back end, we will be developing machine learning algorithms based on A4 trial data to help us do a better job of parsing out who might be amyloid positive and thus eligible for those trials.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Boy, that's really, really hard to do. Well done.
When did that timer start?
Right when I said go. And that's why I'm using the phone and I'm not touching it.
Sorry, I heard 5 minutes earlier, so I went slower.
We have quite a couple of questions though, so you have a little bit more time. So Tom, go ahead.
So I remember a pretty remarkable stat from your proposal, which was that you achieved 79 to 90% retention in prior longitudinal studies.
That's right.
Can you share more about how you achieved that? What tactics were most effective for that level of retention?
Absolutely. So to achieve that, essentially it requires a lot of really hands-on work. So we have been running trials now as a unified care center for about 5 years, but for about 20 years as a full unit. And our methods of achieving this are, first of all, it starts with how we recruit. So our center was out in rural Georgia within the last 2 years more than 135 times. We don't stay put. We understand that we need to bring science out to those folks who need it most. So we hit the road, we eat your barbecue, we're at your Sunday service, we hang out at your firehouse, and that's how we recruit. I was very, very, very interested in the conversation that happened earlier because I very much feel the need for that high-touch sort of lean tech approach, the right tech for the right time. So we are constantly updating our communities on the science that's coming out of our university. We have moments where they can actually chat back and forth with us at times during the week. We have community advisory boards in every one of our care hubs, and we show our folks that they matter. It's a great thing to be able to pair students with communities and with research participants. They all gain from each other, and our students feel really empowered to go out and make these connections and help us with that retention process.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to ask my question to put you into the advancing the field space. So we see your immediate next steps, but talk about long-term sustainability and how are you going to generate scale from obviously something that's very high touch and very local?
Great question. So one of the great assets that we have actually is cooperative extension. So we are a land-grant university, and if you're thinking of scale, you should remember that every single state has at least one land-grant university, right? So I was hearing my fantastic colleague from North Carolina talking about how those units work together. Land grants do too. There's an association of public and land-grant universities, and land grants are generally funded by the USDA, which means we have a single communicating entity that allows us all to tie together. So the Care Center really is a model system. We're building the model here, and then our plan would be to disseminate it to all the other land grants so that there is something like this that can be high touch in all 50 states that can take the technologies that you've heard tonight and that we heard from our panel and install them in those places with built community capital behind those installations.
Fantastic, thank you. Applause for Lisa. Okay, applause for my buddy Tom, who actually reviewed all the applications together with Greg. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Okay, key lesson learned. We can get through a lot of information in 4-minute presentations. So let's remember that as we go to our next conference. Okay. I just have a couple of thank yous that I want to do before I hand this over to Bose. So first of all, I already mentioned a big thank you to Tom Stocky and his colleague Greg Moore. They are consultants with an expertise in technology and AI. They helped the team in reviewing all the applications. We really relied on them heavily. So if I can get a round of applause for their help. Secondly, you might have seen on the bottom of the slides, those were actually slides that were created for us, a template by Startup Health. So if you all don't know Startup Health, they have an Alzheimer's moonshot. They coach companies on pitches, and they volunteered their time to give us both their template, but also to provide coaching to all of our pitch competitors. So if you don't follow Startup Health, please go ahead and do so. Gates Ventures and ADDF are the champions of that organization. Last but not, well, one more, and then my last but not least. So our pitch contestants, you guys were amazing. We tried something really new. You nailed it. I hope everybody actually voted. We want to hear from you. They are going to hang around a little bit. So we're going to open the bar. They will not all get funded. Okay, I know that totally sucks, right? But give me some more money so that we can fund them all. But what that means, though, is that if you see something there that you really like, find them, talk to them. You may have a way of getting their work funded if we can't fund all of them. Okay, so big thank you to all of our pitch contestants. Now, lastly, but it's certainly not lastly, this would not have happened without the small and mighty control team. All of you know that an event that looks like it goes off without flaws means that someone put a whole lot of work in the background. So can I please have Maria Elise, Desi stand up, VK stand up, and then of course, Vanna, who made it all happen, stand up. They made this happen. This is our control team. And Murray and I are very thankful that they did it all. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Niranjan Bose to close us out for the evening.
All right. There is no way I can follow that energy. It is impossible. It drains my energy just watching Phyllis jump up and down. I'm usually the person standing between an open bar or dinner or lunch. And it's true this time around as well. But I walked in very happy that the bar was open. And then Dana's presentation took the buzz out of me. The US life expectancy chart was a buzz killer. And then Phyllis woke me up with her jumping up and down. But most importantly, I think the pitch competition, phenomenal job, all of you. Thank you for all the hard work and the prep. And I want to go back to the panel as well and thank all of you for sharing your perspectives and most importantly, your question. And I come to that because when we started this work 5 years ago, I went around saying we should start a screen fail registry. That's going to be the biggest bang for the buck. But let's think about it. As human beings, we don't ever want to be part of something that's called a fail registry. Like, it doesn't resonate. So we learned we need to change that. Let's call it something else, but people want to be part of something, not just be dormant in a registry. So what is that thing that we can do? And that's where a lot of your ideas have come in. I think we heard Paul talk about the digital engagement platform. Jeff and the Kansas team are leading the work. Hopefully they'll be the first one to get it out there. We want more such ideas. We want it from you. I think we owe it to the community. We owe it to the families, the participants, caregivers. What are those ideas? Please share it with us. We are only enablers. We don't have a product in the market or in the pipeline. We don't have any money to make off of these. We just feel it's the right thing to do. We need to accelerate trial enrollment. Thank you all. And let's have a drink.